Sorry, but they are lying to you.
Welcome to The Big Puzzle. In this podcast, we explore the subtle connections between science, religion, politics, economics, and history. One piece at a time, we unveil the big picture of this shared experience that we call life.
I want to explain in this video why they're not solving the hallucination problem with AI. And to explain it, several people have tried to explain it in many clever ways, but I think that the underlying problem is a problem of interpolation. So I was thinking, when I saw something similar in my career, and I think I mentioned that the first part of my career had a lot to do with geographic information systems. So let me tell you a little about that, and hopefully will help you understand why they cannot solve the hallucination problem the way they claim they can. So one important thing in geographic information systems is to have reliable data. And data has usually been very expensive. In the early days, if you needed some satellite data, you had to spend several $1,000s to get a specific one. It was very expensive to do anything. But in I think it was the year 2000, NASA started a program that it was a mission that was called the SRTM, so the Shuttle Radar Topographic Mission. And it didn't have to do with satellite images, but with terrain models. And before that, terrain models were extremely expensive, because usually what you had to do was to hire a company that would fly the area that you wanted to create a terrain model for, and then there was a lot of manual processes that they had to do to build a 3D terrain model. But NASA, they just had the shuttle, so they sent the shuttle to space, and what it did is shown is the past of shine, right? Yeah, well, it's shown a radar on the Earth, and by measuring when the radar signal came back, they could calculate the distance. So if you know the position of the shuttle in space, and then you scan the surface, just retrieving data reflected from the terrain, then you can calculate the elevation, right? And do all that computation and build terrain models. Those terrain models mostly came in two sizes. One was a 90 meter, I think it was 3-second arc, but it basically was 90 meter cells, think like pixels, and the other one was 30 meters. And they published them for free. So it was really a game changer. So if you don't know the technology, well, now you probably heard about LiDAR. LiDAR is kind of the same idea. Or even sonar in the submarines. You know that they can measure distance by pinging and measuring the time to return. So this was the same idea. Well, but not everything was great. First of all, the orbit of the shuttle prevented it to scan over a certain latitude. So you didn't have anything high latitude close to the poles. So you couldn't have SRTM data from there. But the problem I want to talk about is the no data problem. So think about the shuttle flying through space and scanning, the Earth below. Now, sometimes they didn't scan just directly down, but it had an angle. So sometimes that angle didn't let them to see, the on the shadow, let's say, of mountains, right? So they couldn't see what it was behind the mountains because of the angle that they were scanning. And there were other sources of error where the data that came back was not reliable, so they couldn't use that. And so what you end up having is, a complete coverage of the Earth, but with holes. It had holes in certain places. So now the idea was, okay, how do we fill those holes? Because, for instance, you're going to use digital terrain model for hydrology. Well, the water has to go somewhere. You can't have a hole of, we don't know what's happening in here. Lately, they fixed it with data from other missions, posterior missions. But initially, it was mostly algorithmically. So they had to interpolate. They had to guess using some algorithm what was in those holes, but they had no data. And if you only miss one cell, but you have all the surrounding data from all the surrounding cells, you could probably average it, average the elevation of all the surrounding cells, and most likely you will get a good value. You could be very unlucky because it was just a little mound there or a hole or whatever. You wouldn't capture that. But again, algorithms is about best guesses. But what happened if you had kind of a large area, 10, 20, 30, 100 missed pixels or cells? How do you fill those? And they're very clever algorithms that they look at all the surrounding area, calculate the probability or the probability, but the statistical distribution of elevations and a lot of other things, and then rebuilds that empty spot with whatever they have. But those kind of work, but you don't know if they work unless you go and measure it, and it's too expensive to go and measure everything. So, for instance, if you miss some data in the middle of Bonneville Salt Flats, you can just guess it's the same elevation as the rest. If you've ever been there, it's very flat. But what happens if you miss some data in the Grand Canyon? So is there a cliff there? Is there a slope that you can see? Are there several steps? It's very difficult to know what's going on there. So they did a pretty good job, useful for most of the cases. But every time that you use it, you have to be aware of the holes. If the data that you have was actually measured, observed, or if it was guessed from an algorithm. Right? Now, let's talk about AI. AI is kind of a version of the SRTM mission. You had something that went around looking for all the knowledge that was available, right? Instead of looking at the terrain, it looked at knowledge. And scanning the internet, Wikipedia, all the sources that they could find, they built a knowledge model. That is a LLM. So the way they work is, if they observe something in the internet and you ask specifically about that, they can give you a pretty accurate answer, like the elevation that was observed, right? So you know that, But what happened when you find holes? Because there were a lot of holes in the knowledge. Now, this interpolation algorithm that we talk about in terrain, in this case, they're called, again, the LLMs, large language models. Those are the algorithms that fill the holes. And they give you an answer. They give you an elevation of knowledge. Right? Could be right, could be wrong. They can't tell if it's right or wrong because you don't know. There's nothing to compare with, right? They don't have any any knowledge there to compare with. So I don't know what's going on there. I think it's a school. So let's keep the analogy. When you ask a question to AI, they can know how close they are to what was used to train them, right, to the knowledge that they observed. And they can also know if they are just building stuff because they are way too far from the knowledge. They're in the middle of a big hole. They will still give you an answer, but they know that the answer is not reliable, right? So that's what we call hallucinations. So hallucinations is giving you an answer just because they can put words that make sense one after the other. But there's nothing in that training set, that is close to what they're saying. So they claim that they can solve hallucinations just by using that. Let's say, okay, if we are in the middle of the hole, we don't have any data, we can just not give you an answer, and we will have AI that said, I don't know. Right? So they say, okay, that's probably better than just making things up. Just say, I don't know, that's probably good. I think there's a problem there, because how often would you use, or how much trust would you have in an AI that every 3 questions it tells you, I don't know? You would give up. So that marketing part, right, is important. So they are willing to let the AI to hallucinate just to give you an answer. But this is the real problem. The real problem is that those hallucinations most of the time get it right. Again, think about the Bonneville South Flats. Yeah, there's a big hole there, but if you guess the elevation, you will get it right most of the time, right? Even if you haven't observed it, you know that it's so flat that you will get it right. And they can't tell them apart. They don't know if they're in a Bonneville South Flat hole or in a Grand Canyon hole, right? So if they just say, if we don't have any data, or if we're too far from what we know, from what we observed, we're not giving you an answer, that means that they won't give you a lot of what we now consider good answers, that are just lucky guesses, because, interpolation mostly works, right? They can't put that threshold, because then what you will have is just the internet. It's just Google with a little more capabilities that would search things that already exist for you, but it won't give you this, oh, I can answer whatever, I can solve whatever. So that's why I'm so sure that hallucinations are not going away. And if hallucinations don't go away, you have the worst problem ever. It's that it's not reliable. And it's definitely useful, and AI can help you build drafts and do some basic stuff. And I'm not saying it's not useful. I'm just saying the promises that they are making are not going to be fulfilled. I use the example of a freezer. I think I mentioned this before. So what is worse than a freezer that doesn't work? Well, it's a freezer that works most of the time. And that is the problem with LLM. It works most of the time, but you don't know when it doesn't work. And that ruins the whole thing. Would you allow it to make financial decisions for you that could ruin you? Would you let it make medical decisions? Which kind of decisions would you allow an AI to make that could have dire consequences on you? And the answer is none. If you're smart enough. You say, no, I will not let something that's once in a while makes us stuff. So I hope the analogy works to help you understand why we have hallucination, why we have holes in our knowledge, and why they can't get rid of them. Now, you can always dream of a solution. You can always dream of a new algorithm that, gets it right every time, that solves the problem. But you can't count on that. You can't expect it to happen. You can plan, especially you cannot invest trillions of dollars just expecting that suddenly the problem will go away. That's why we're seeing the bubble now. And that's why I'm so strongly advocating against what they're doing. People who, jump on the bandwagon of AI, I would say that probably 90% of my LinkedIn list, they have AI specialist, AI advocate, AI executive, AI whatever. Everybody's trying to selfishly get their benefits, even though by doing so they're hurting everybody else and themselves. People that don't want to study computer science because they believe it's useless. That's wrong. AI will never replace an expert in computer science, because he cannot, because he will make up stuff, because he will make mistakes. Again, you say, well, it will get better. No, you can't count on that. If it does, good, great, but don't plan your future on that. So if I could give any advice that anybody would care, keep business as usual, as before this hype. Keep hiring people, keep investing in the human side, keep studying, keep learning. Use AI like you use a spreadsheet. Yeah, it could be very useful, but a spreadsheet will not replace anybody, right? So this is the same thing. Furthermore, if you hire some junior level, especially very, very fresh, keep them away from AI. Do whatever. Say you cannot use AI, because that's the only way they can learn from their mistakes. So when they become senior, they know how to fix AI, what AI is doing. If we cut that pipeline like we're doing now, well, when old people like me start retiring, you're doomed. There's nobody to replace, and you have an AI just making stuff up. And we have just painted ourselves into a corner. Okay, so I hope that this helps. If you disagree and you can prove me wrong, please do. Leave some comments, and if you believe that what I'm saying is right, spread it. So tell other people, share this video or make your own. I don't care. We need to stop the bubble as soon as possible, right? So it doesn't hurt us much more. Okay, that would be it. See you in the next one. Bye.